All right, welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the very first craft forum that is being sponsored by both the American Craft Council, Surf Plus, Springboard for the Arts, and SNAG. My name is Gwen Rookenbrod Smith, and I will be the moderator for today's conversation. I am the executive director of SNAG, and I have a few house rules. One of the things I am seeing is a lot of people's cameras and audios are on, and we are asking you to please turn off your cameras and your audio. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, the way that you do that is you take your cursor to the bottom of the screen, over to the left, you should see a microphone and a video camera, and we ask that you please turn both of those off. We also have some tech people who will be doing that for you as well. So if they get to it before you do, I just want to give you a heads up, that's why. We are trying to just kind of limit the video and audio to both our presenters and our hosts. Although it's nice to see some of the faces I recognize. Hi, Lucy. We'll give you all a minute to do that. And then I'm going to just kind of also give a little brief rundown of how we're going to run today's conversation. But I'll give us all a moment. Again, if you're joining us just now and you are able to see yourselves, we will be stopping your videos and muting you. It was an auto setting in the meeting, but sometimes it doesn't always do what we want it to do here on Zoom. So we have some tech people that will be stopping your videos if you can't stop it yourself. And we do ask you that you do not unmute your microphone as well. All right, close. All right, thank you. So again, welcome to the very first ACC Craft Forum, Vulnerabilities, Disruptions, and Opportunities in the Marketplace. You may be all stuck in your house right now, but it's really an important time for us to think outside the box. This is going to be a free three-part online series that's meant to be inspiring, refreshing, pragmatic, and a safe conversation space to explore innovations in our craft communities to the adversities and challenges during our COVID-19 outbreak. We also will give you an opportunity to hear from you about ways artists, writers, and organizers are creating innovation in a time of crisis. Again, for those of you who joined late, my name is Gwen Rookenbrod Smith. I am the moderator as well as the executive director of SNAG. And I am excited to participate in this because, as you all know, in a time of crisis, and this is a Sarah Schultz quote. Sarah, I'm giving you 100% credit for this. She said, in a time of crisis is the best place for innovation to be created. And I totally 100% agree with that. So with that, a couple things, just kind of some house rules. Most of you have had your videos and your audios turned off. We ask that you keep them off for the duration of the meeting, please, unless you are a presenter or a host. Also, for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, there's a couple different views that you can see. If you move your cursor to the top right corner of the whole Zoom screen, you actually can either do a speaker view or you can do a gallery view. The speaker view will bring up the speaker at the moment. The gallery view will actually be the Brady Bunch screen where you can see all of the presenters and all of the hosts at any point in time. The second thing is if you move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, and it is located at the bottom for most people, but I have come across a few people that find it defaulting to their top of the screen. So I want to make sure that you find that. There's a navigation bar that pops up. On that navigation bar, there is in the middle a chat box. And if you click on that chat box, you will open the chat. You can see that there's been some things already posted in the chat. But what's very important is where you see the two, and then there's a little bubble in blue that has a drop-down triangle. You want to make sure that if you are responding to anybody, that you want to make sure it goes to everyone in the meeting so that we can all see it. So this is where you will be typing your comments, your chat, your questions, And if you have any personal resources yourself, any links that you want to share, feel free to also put them in there as well. So we will do our best. We have over 1,000 people that have signed up for the class and almost 500 people that are joining us currently right now. So as you ask your questions and we walk through each presentation, we will do our best to try to address every question, but the reality is we're just going to run out of time. But we are hoping that you'll be given another opportunity to answer your question and another opportunity in time. So the first thing I'd like to do is I just want to do a quick check-in with Jason Samuels, who's our tech guru, to make sure I didn't forget anything, Jason.
No, I think you got everything.
Wonderful.
Keep going.
Thank you. All right. So the first person I really would like to take a moment just to introduce is Lauren Baker. Lauren Baker is going to be our chat room moderator. She is also a UK-based doctoral researcher exploring the role of supporting organizations in the development of craft career pathways. Lauren originally trained in textiles design before shifting craft lanes and becoming a jewelry curator whilst also studying her master's in art museum and gallery studies. She began her PhD in 2017, adopting ethnographic techniques to record the entrepreneurial experiences of craft practitioners in Scotland. She is our current researcher in residence remotely for ACC because of the impact of COVID-19, but she will actually be compiling all of the chat questions and the answers and the information for us so that we have a nice document at the end that we can all refer to. So everybody say welcome to Lauren. And Lauren, thank you so much. I don't know if you want to say hi to everybody, but I wanted to make people knew who you were.
Thank you, Gwyn. Excellent introduction. Hello, yes, my name's Lauren. I'll be here hopefully, helpfully going through your questions at the side and helping Gwyn in this session.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren, so much. All right. And the next person I'd like to take a moment to introduce is Sarah Schultz, the Executive Director of American Craft Council. Sarah, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, first of all, I'm very proud of myself that I remembered to unmute my mic. And I would just like to say hello to everyone, welcome, and really thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us today. I've been at the Craft Council 2 years, and it's been no small irony for me to recognize and acknowledge that the American Craft Council actually kind of formed and came into being in 1939, in the middle of what was another huge economic crisis and crisis in the United States. And I feel like it's in our DNA of the organization, really in our mission, really to be there for artists when they need us most, and all through the good times and the challenging times. I just want to say that I know this is an extremely raw and unnerving time for all of us. But what actually gives me hope in it is all of you, all of the artists, and all of the great makers and thinkers here, because I know that, you know, the creativity runs deep and wide, and if there was ever a group of people who are extremely adaptable and flexible and innovative, it's in these circles. So thank you all, bless you all, I appreciate you all, and look forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. And I have to thank Sarah and Scott from the American Craft Council for including me in all of our conversations and also asking me to moderate today's conversation. I'm very excited to be part of that. The next person I'd like to introduce you all to is another one of our supporters and sponsors for these conversations, and it's Cornelia Carey, the Executive Director of Surf Plus. Cornelia, would you like to welcome the group?
Oh, hey, group. I think I'm from that other generation where we just don't do this. We do emails maybe at most. So please excuse my possible awkwardness. But my heartfelt thanks to the ACC and to my colleagues who are presenters in this call. I certainly getting through this difficult time with so much uncertainty and loss, et cetera, are these conversations with artists and artist lovers. And it makes us feel less alone and a lot more hopeful. SURF is, as you know, many of you hopefully know, we're a national artist service organization, and our whole focus is helping you as artists sustain and create strong careers. So any way that we can help you at this point in time with our information and resources on our website, and I'll share that link with you when I get to the chat spot. I can't do it right now because I'm lucky I can even talk. Also our emergency relief assistance, and also know that we're advocating for your interests in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere right now. I also wanted to thank many of you who completed our survey that concludes today. We've heard from over 3,000 artists about their losses and other things that they're dealing with in this crisis. That's very important data for all of us to have, and we look forward to sharing that with you. And thanks to the organizations that passed it on to the artists they serve. I just wanted to give you just a piece of a wonderful our essay that Andrew Seminet wrote at the kind of head of the pandemic. It was called This Is What We Train For. If you mostly hang out with artists, you might think your skills as an artist are normal. They are not. Few people have the range, depth of practice, and follow through to discover and manifest new visions. Artists navigate the unknown. We go into our studios and ask new questions, pushing away from shore and into uncertainty. In this time of roiling uncertainty, we know how to stay awake and responsive and how to help others do the same. So I'm so grateful for this next 3 series of conversations, and I look forward to talking to many of you over the coming months. Thanks a lot.
That's great. Thank you, Cornelia. That's a beautiful, beautiful piece of prose. So thanks for sharing that as well. And we are putting links in the chat, everybody, for those of you who may not be familiar with some of our organizations and some of the work that we're doing. So absolutely. And Cornelia, someone asked if you could send a copy of that. So maybe afterwards we can send it to Lauren to include in the notes, which would be really great.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So last but certainly not least, I would also like to introduce Laura Zabel. Laura is the Executive Director of Springboard for the Arts, which is another sponsor of our next 3 forums. So Laura, feel free to go ahead and welcome everybody.
Great, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here and see all of you and be in community with everyone today. Springboard is a community and economic development organization that's run by and for artists. We're based in Minnesota, both in the Twin Cities and the urban area and in a rural community called Fergus Falls. We work with artists of all disciplines at all stages of their career, making programs that connect people directly to resources around business skills and healthcare and all those nuts and bolts, and also make programs that are about how communities connect to artists. And we work both here in Minnesota in a really direct and place-based way, and then nationally we work to share resources and tools. So just a couple resources that I want to point out that we have specific to this moment. If any of you are interested in working on emergency relief funds locally for artists, we have both a pretty comprehensive list of emergency relief funds that are happening all across the country on our website. We also published a guide for how to start an emergency relief fund to try and help people kind of get a head start. We know there are a lot of people gratefully working on that right now, and we're trying to kind of build that network of folks who are building those funds locally. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm excited to hear the conversation. I think we can all think about and talk about all the ways that artists will put their creativity to this moment and all the ways that artists are already putting their creativity to the moment. I think I want to just end by saying and kind of acknowledging to the group that I think when we're speaking outside of our own community, there's a real and right focus on the economic impact of this moment on creative people. But here in community with all of you, I also want to acknowledge this sort of second layer of heartbreak that I think many of us are experiencing, which is just a tremendous loss of opportunity and creative output and creative work that people have been doing. So yes, look forward, yes, innovate, yes, put your back into this creative moment and give yourself time to grieve and mourn, because I think we all know that something very real was lost and continues to be lost. So thanks so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here and excited to hear the conversation.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Laura. And for those of you who are not familiar with Springboard for the Arts, they have a great website with lots of tools, kits, and resources for artists. I personally have a long history because my job before this, I worked in economic development in North Carolina, and we used your community supported artist program, as well as we've been to your Rural Arts Cultural Summit. So Springboard, SURF, and ACC are amazing national leaders in the craft and arts community. And for those of you who are joining us that aren't real familiar with any of them, please make sure you visit their website. Links are being posted right now in the chat. Wonderful resources and opportunities for everybody. So everybody should definitely check out all those websites. It's really wonderful. So as I was working with ACC and planning this conversation today, we kind of broke these presentations down into different questions. And one of the first questions that we talked about, particularly Scott and I talked a lot about, is kind of like, is there any kind of examples of things that we can look at that have happened from the past? In other words, what have we learned in the past from situations? Obviously, we're experiencing a situation unlike anything we've ever experienced before. But at the same time, we have had economic crises in the past. So I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker to kind of talk to us a little bit about how he has adjusted his business when the 2008 crash kind of happened. So Jackson Schwartz is the co-founder of a company called Hennepin Made. It's a glass lighting fixture company that was launched in response to the last economic recession. He and his co-founder, Joe Limpert, launched their business in 2011, driven by a desire to build something sustainable and transformative for the field. Skilled artists and glassblowers, the duo saw an opportunity to connect their passion for glass with lighting design and quickly made a national name for themselves. In 2016, still growing rapidly, the crew purchased, renovated, and moved their operations into this blows my mind, a 30,000 square foot formal industrial warehouse in Minneapolis's rising North Loop. Today, Hennepin Made's headquarters is home to 7 full-time glassblowers with more than 80 years of collective experience among them, working alongside a team of 10 additional staff. Jackson also operates Parallel, a cafe and workspace, and the Holden Room, which is an event space, all integrated into the operational model for Hennepin Made. Jackson, thank you for joining us today. And I would love for you to just take a moment to introduce yourself, your business model, and kind of really talk about what was it that led you to change the way you work during the crisis of 2008.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and share some of our experiences and our journey. You know, we all have this situation in front of us, and I think a lot of diversity and approaches are going to be very, very important. So I graduated college in 2008. It was a pretty tough year. Spent a couple years doing art fairs on the road, like a lot of you probably on this this meeting and call have done. And so after doing those for about 2 years, we were successful at them. However, I was just feeling like you know, there was maybe a different model that would really work to satisfy what we wanted to try to accomplish, which was producing you know, hand-blown glass and really be part of a team. So one of the things for me that really shifted coming out of art school in those first 2 years was I no longer wanted to do it alone. You know, coming out of art school, there was all this emphasis on like you, the individual, and while the individual still is very important and autonomy of the individual, you know, we really wanted to build a community, especially after those 2 years of kind of taking one path. We said, well, what if we built something that's bigger than ourselves and really try to create a model that, you know, has a lot more people involved. I was teaching at the time, coming out of school at a university. So I love the energy in the university, but I really wanted something that probably could move a little bit faster and evolved in a different way. And so we started Hennepin Made with the idea that it was a scalable business, still, you know, really committed to the values of handmade, integrity, and innovation. So once we scaled, we were able to scale our business model, then we wanted to continue to have, you know, this environment where a lot of creativity happened. And that's why we pulled in some of those other businesses. And then also they helped stabilize some of the revenues from more of a pragmatic, you know, sort of business model sense.
That's great. Jackson, tell me a little bit about, usually artists, when they come out of school, or they're used to working on their own or with a small team, really don't think about the scale that you said you created a business that was scalable. What did you get advice from other business owners when you were going through this process? Was it just something that you and your co-founder felt that you wanted to create kind of a much larger impact in the community and stick to your values as well? But I find, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people don't think about really turning themselves into really what you are as a small manufacturing company.
Correct.
Right. And so what was that thought process for you guys?
So a lot of the vision came from my time. I lived abroad for 4 years in Australia, and I was part of the development of a nonprofit glass center there. Mm-hmm. That was about a $15 million facility. Mm-hmm. And so I saw that really come together from the ground up. Was part of the initial team that developed all the programming, built the studios, opened the place up to the public, and then evolved and iterated really quickly. And so I saw the opportunities that created for a lot of people, myself included, and then saw how it could really act as a catalyst for a larger community. And as artists and craftspeople, a lot of what we want is a sense of belonging, right? We want that connection. And so I saw how that worked. And then, coming back here to the United States, and then given the sort of economic situation, we had a lot of really talented people that I, developed deep relationships with, that I was like, we got to do something. And so I kind of was able to put those two things together, this past experience with the potential, and also understanding, that at the time there weren't really very many companies making lighting. So I was like, there's a real opportunity here to pivot just slightly from what we're doing, and fill a new need.
So because I actually am trained in hot glass, and I've run a nonprofit glass access studio in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm also the chair of the North Carolina Glass Center, so I have a glass knowledge. But tell me a little bit, lighting, who's your primary customer? Are you getting a lot of your sales into commercial places, individual homes, that sort of thing?
It's a mix. We have a lot of business in the hospitality world, so hotels and restaurants. So that's going to be a little slow going.
Yeah, and how do you meet the UL rating requirements for that? Did you work with another lighting company to help you overcome that?
No, we just did it ourselves.
Okay. And for those of you who may or may not know about commercial versus private residential, a lot of times, especially with lighting and some other materials, there's requirements to keep them up to code. And I'm very familiar with the lighting requirements that often come with commercial lighting. So I was curious to see how you figured that out.
A lot of things.
Oh, YouTube is a great place to learn. Absolutely. Yep. We actually have a couple questions. And unfortunately, I have to take off my glasses to read the chat. So pardon me for that. But one of the questions is, what do you think is the future of craft shows and art fairs? And how do you think this is going to really be impacted by the pandemic, both socially and economically? Do you have some thoughts on that, since you used to do them?
Yes. So in the short term, they're not going to be happening, right? We all know that. So short term being the next couple months. Past that, we have no certainty of what the reality will be. We can make some guesses or speculations. There's, when we started Hennepin Made, and what we try to do is assess some truths that we could believe in, that we thought, would have sort of an enduring, consistency. And so one of those is building an emotional connection. That's one of our truths, right? If you can build an emotional connection, it doesn't really matter what happens with the economics. There's always going to be a need for that. So getting back to sort of the craft show and the craft show model, I think models will evolve, and we may see some new spins, and but people will always want to get together. People will always want to go do things, and people will want to connect with people who make things. So I don't think that need is ever going to go away. I think the structure may change. The other thing that we thought about really is we kind of conceptualize like what commerce is, and really our company is based around having something to share, and we believe craft is something to share. And so we really imagine commerce as being a byproduct of having something to share. So in the sense of a craft show, or those markets, really they're a sharing experience in any community, amongst the craftspeople. I mean, those of you who have done them, you have your roadie friends, right? It's like every city you show up and you're saying hi to all, it's like little craft camp. And so from the people that do those shows to the audience, you have your regular customers in different markets. Really, it's about you sharing your goods, you sharing your process, your story, your evolution. And then the byproduct is that people buy things. And I don't think that fundamentally will change forever. I mean, it's been going on, you know, for a long, long time. And I think it'll continue to go on for a long, long time. I just think the structure and how it's packaged from a marketing sense and what the right sort of economic model, those things might change.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that. Tell me a little bit about your staff. Do your staff come and stay? Do you use it more of a training opportunity for young glassblowers coming out of school to learn about how to run their own business? And kind of what model do you use for your staffing that you use there at Hennepin, Maine?
Yeah, so we have a model that's evolved with the business. So originally, when we first hired people, you know, we really were looking for employees that kind of are going to take those really strong management positions and grow into good leaders. And we've had good success at that. And then we anticipate as we continue to grow, we'll have lower level, more entry level type of employees that will really hit their sort of curve of opportunities over a couple of years, probably 2 to 3 years. And then there won't be a lot of opportunity because we're not looking to make a massive, you know, factory, right?
Right.
So what we'll do in the future as we have growth and need people, you know, on the production part of the business, and we've done this before, we articulate, you know, probably the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to learn an incredible amount. And then after that, there's probably not going to be the level of opportunity that may keep you stimulated. And so then from there, it's up to them to decide if they're at a level that they like, or if they're on to their next thing and they've kind of learned what they can learn.
That's great. My last question for you, and then we'll move on to our next presenter, is are there some resources locally that you have utilized that maybe a lot of artists here aren't aware of, like a small business association or a CDFI lending institution? You know, like I said earlier, we talked about the UL lighting, but on the business side, have you tapped into some resources that are available in the Minneapolis area to help you grow and scale your business?
Yeah, so the city of Minneapolis has a 2% loan program. You can use that for infrastructure. There are also like SBA is, you know, more of a federal program, but administered locally. So there's a program called the 7A loan, which it can be really, really helpful. Those are the primary ones that we've leveraged. We've gotten a couple smaller grants and stuff over the years. Yeah, so those would be the main two.
That's
that
great.
we would use. I'm really involved though with a lot of business associations and you know, different ways to gather information. So I think more important than specific programs, it's having relationships that are outside of your domain. And then you can bring them some expertise and knowledge, and then they bring you expertise and knowledge. And most of those are going to be, you know, informal mentorships or informal relationships and how they develop.
That's great. Thanks. And we do have one last question from somebody in the audience. They want to know how you market yourself. What techniques do you use to market yourself?
There's never really been, you know, greater access to build an audience. That statement will continue to be true every single day for the rest of our lives. I believe that. There's a better ability today than there was yesterday because of digital tools, right? Instagram and Pinterest are by far the most powerful marketing tools that you can leverage. Facebook is good too, so is SEO. But the data will tell you that Instagram and Pinterest are the most powerful. Email marketing is surprisingly very, very powerful as well. The key to any marketing is being consistent. So if I send an email or I post something and then you don't hear from me for 60 days, you're going to forget who I am. And then the next time I reach out to you, you might not want to hear from me again. Yeah. So it's really about the right level of consistency with a message that is compelling. So I think the other thing I didn't mention is that I, you know, would to this group is, you know, you spend all this time making your objects, right? Or making your craft really amazing. Think about what else you're crafting. Are you crafting a vision, or you're crafting a strategy, or are you crafting a compelling narrative? And then figuring out what other tools that you need to get good at using to leverage, you know, what you're trying to produce and push out into the world.
That's great. Jackson, thank you for taking some time to share today. We are going to move on to our next presenter, and Jackson will stick around. So if we have any questions at the end for you, you can feel free to weigh in. Our next presenter is Ayumi Horie, and she is the founder of Pots in Action. She is lauded for her pioneering use in digital marketing and social media within contemporary ceramics. She is a full-time studio potter located in Portland, Maine, and she makes mostly functional pots, mainly with drawings of animals. In 2015, she was awarded a Distinguished Fellow Grant in Craft by the United States Artists and is the first recipient of Ceramics Monthly Ceramic Artist of the Year Award. She has taught workshops and given lectures at many universities, art centers, and residencies in the United States and abroad. She is served on the board of directors at the Archie Bray Foundation for 9 years, where she was a resident for 2 years between 1996 and 1998. And she is currently both on the board of the American Craft Council and Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. Her work is in various collections throughout the United States, including the Museum of Art and Design in New York City. And in the chat, we will be linking some additional links for you to find out more about Ayumi. But Ayumi, thank you for joining us today.
Great, thanks so much, Gwen. And thanks to everybody for taking the time to be here. I'm going to quickly talk about my own work online and then some impacts I've seen on the craft community from the pandemic, and then some artists making work in response to it. So just like everybody else, my life has changed. Cancellations of events I was looking forward to, like workshops, lectures, an award at NCECA, postponing side projects like the Democratic Cup. And then on a more personal level, my mother flew back early from Tokyo and is now quarantining in my studio. So my studio work's been put on hold. And of course, my assistant can't come to work in the studio because of social distancing. So I'm adapting just like everybody else. I actually started 20 years ago in the early days of the internet. I graduated from grad school in 2000, and I looked around and I intentionally built my business and my community online. And weirdly enough, it happens that I designed a life that can weather this kind of pandemic. In 2001, the year after I graduated, I coded my own website, and then I started selling online in 2005, before a lot of people were selling online. And I think that sort of the transactional nature of that was important, but I also wanted this sort of social element, and I wanted to use my presence online to be educational. I had a huge links page. And so one project I started was Pots in Action, and it started at first on my own website. And it was a way in which people could send me either posed or candid images of my work in use. And it was a way to complete the loop between me, the maker, and the user. I wanted to see where my pots ended up, and I plotted them all on a Google map when that first came out. And then that moved onto Instagram in 2014, and it took off from there. It became a feed where guest hosts that were experts in whatever area would cover topical issues within ceramics. And that went on for 5 years, and that took a lot of my energy. I've worked on various fundraisers online. Obamaware was the first craft fundraiser of its kind in 2008. Handmade for Japan in 2011, we raised over $100,000 for disaster relief for Japanese survivors of the earthquake and tsunami. We raised $50,000 for a fellow potter, Krista Assad, who broke her back. We just had another auction for me and my class in Chile for Centro de Arte Curamilla. We just had an auction for them online before this all started. So for years, I've thought about being online as a kind of second studio practice. I mean, I think at this point, it's just part of what artists need to do, small businesses need to do to survive. But so I've been working at it for a while now. And then just to put things into perspective, it's really only been 2 weeks, right? It's only been 3 weeks at the most since this all started. We're at the beginning of it. I mean, we're not close to the peak yet. And so I feel like whatever response feels natural to you is the right response. I think it takes all kinds of responses to manage the situation. My own approach has been more of an emotional and kind of mental one. The first thing I did was fairly reactive. So as soon as NCECA was canceled, I put up a germ cup on Instagram and had a quick auction for that. And it went for about 300% of its retail value. So I donated that to their scholarships. That was one small gesture. And then because I don't have access to my studio, I've been sort of working on some things to put in my shops. So let me just share my screen. So I've been making a series of, so this is a t-shirt that Mikey Walsh drew and I designed, and we did it in 2010. It was all about ceramic anxiety. Ceramics and I had a fight, but we still love each other. And there's a way in which I really wanted to kind of promote handmade pots, not just with handmade pots, but with kind of pop culture and pop material. So there was this t-shirt. This is a German word I made up. You know how they have these really long compound words, you string together a bunch of words. So this one's kiln, catastrophe, and anxiety. And it describes that feeling when you know something's gone horribly wrong in the kiln, but you have to wait all night or all weekend or all week to open that kiln up. Before this all started, I was actually starting to work on a series of golden germ cups. And then weirdly enough, it seems pretty relevant now. And so I wanted to make t-shirts out of them also. I feel like it's important to have a variety of price points. Those cups are on the expensive side, so I wanted to make work that was affordable as well.
That's great.
This is a cup I feel really proud of. I have a side project called the Democratic Cup. And it's a project involving a lot of artists who've collaborated on the forms and the drawings to talk about social issues and to bring some civility back to in-person conversations about really hard political or social issues. So 4 years ago, Sarah Barron, who's an illustrator in Brooklyn, drew this vaccine superhero because I've been fairly active with public health. And then a bunch of anxious and worried germs. And it's a way to, you know, take a scary thing and make it either less scary or to just move the conversation forward with people. And so this project works in public spaces where there are groups of people having discussions, but in a lot of ways, it works best in private spaces, in kitchens, and these very intimate spaces with family and friends. I'm going to stop sharing.
Great.
Will you just keep it, let me know about time too as we go along?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're about 2 more minutes.
Oh my goodness.
I know, it goes fast.
It does. Wow. Okay, so a couple things that I've seen. Digitally fluent people are obviously weathering this a lot better than people who have relied on geographic closeness to have studio sales. For me, I'm a new mom, so parents versus non-parents. All of a sudden we have 8 hours less time to work, and we have 8 hours more time with our baby, which is amazing. But it's also a challenge. This is Lenka Clayton has, you guys see that? It's her manifesto. She's an artist in Pittsburgh who's put together artist residency for mothers because she believes that, and I agree, that careers and motherhood are not mutually exclusive. And so it's a residency that you can sign on to where you explore the fragmented focus, the nap length, studio time, limited movement and resources, and general upheaval that parenthood brings. So that's a really interesting project. I'll post the link in a second. And then I think the other thing is, to me, this crisis has really revealed the sort of stark fragility of the craft ecosystem. The haves and the have-nots, the people that have disposable incomes are doing a lot of retail therapy and can support the rest of us. But then we have the reality that so many people have lost their jobs, their day jobs. They might have a presence online, but they may not be able to access their studios anymore. And so to me, being a maker is inherently political. And so for me, we need to talk about the kind of moral obligations that craft organizations have, that the government has. We need to make a more resilient system. I mean, this needs to really be a revolution after this, because I feel like something like this is potentially going to happen again with climate change. In terms of the positive stuff I'm seeing online, people are starting to use Instagram Live or WhatsApp text groups. I mean, there's a way in which social media has failed us, and people are reaching out directly to people. And I feel like it feels like the internet used to be in the early days. A sense of generosity is back. And then lastly, all this rapid response to COVID-19. So,
Yeah, Amy, are you finding you're spending a lot more time on social media now that you can't go into your studio?
Some, but you know, I'm just spending time with my baby also. Like, I'm thinking about mobiles and doing clay projects with her. And yeah, I feel like there is a huge gap between people that don't have kids, that are lonely or bored or have lots of time now, and then parents who are juggling all kinds of things. I had no idea before I had a kid. So
yeah.
Can you see this Lenka Clayton's website? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's your website, the Artist Residency Program,
Actually,
Americans
you
for
need
the
to,
Arts.
we're seeing actually different screens. So
all right, hold on. Sorry.
that's okay. If you share your desktop, you should be able to flip between tabs on your website. That makes sense. We can also type the website into the chat for everyone else to go to if you'd like.
Okay, do you see that?
Yes, that's
Okay,
the Americans for the Arts.
I think that a lot of what we need to do is legislative. If you guys could support Americans for the Arts, that's great. The Socially Engaged Craft Collective is doing a series of talks. Michael Strand is part of those. In terms of the pandemic response, Stephanie Sajuko jumped right on making masks. The textile community has been incredible. But again, I feel like there's been a failure of the federal government to direct businesses to make PPEs and to release their stockpile. So I feel like yet again, we have artists donating their labor, especially women, and that to me doesn't feel right. Timia Tehani in Seattle with a Slip Rabbit Studio is making face masks. There are all kinds of, this is the Mask Crusaders, my equipment donor form. I'll post all these links. Masks Now. The NIH has all these patterns for 3D printers. Paper engineers, Nora Atkinson turned me on to these. Del Harrow was a great resource for a lot of these. Baltimore OpenWorks Studio has been making face shields. NYC makes PPE, and I think that's it.
That's great. Thanks, Amy. There's a lot of resources you've shared, and we'll be sure to make sure that we get those into the chat or at least into the notes afterward, because there's a lot of really great stuff that's going on out there and happening. And I think, you know, Amy, you were a little ahead of the curve with your social media and using your social media as a way to promote a lot of the work that you've been doing. But I am seeing people find great success right now on selling pieces, doing things to raise money for different organizations in need, that sort of thing through social media. So I love the statement that you said that we're kind of getting back to the generosity that social media used to have.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. We're getting back to the sort of how-tos of that the American studio craft movement started with in the 40s.
Yep.
But I also want to just say that I've gotten a few emails from organizations, and I know everybody's struggling right now, but I think there's a way in which we need to pull back from pushing sales and be a little bit more sensitive to people's situations.
Yeah, I think that's tough. You know, it was interesting. We were having a conversation with somebody from Americans for the Arts the other day, and a lot of people are offering their services free of charge. And she actually will be presenting next week, and she has some really interesting perspective on, you know, what kind of precedences are we setting for offering all of these services for free right now when artists should be paid. So it's a very interesting kind of conversation that's happening. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep.
So thank you so much, Ayumi, for sharing your thoughts and sharing some of the resources that you've come across. We really appreciate it. So as we move through today's conversation, you know, we talked about kind of, you know, what have we learned with Jackson, and with Ayumi, we talked about what's new about the scenario and what might some innovation look like, and she gave us some great examples. And now I'd like to really move into talking a little bit with Tori Hong. Really around the questions of how do we coordinate new ways of working. And Tori is the co-founder of the Asian American Youth Storytellers and She Spends community member. She's an independent illustrator, a public speaker, a community-driven curator, and public artist based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She explores the connections between art and ancestors using bold lines, vibrant colors, and deep trust in her work. Tori has worked with organizations such as the Minneapolis Institute of Art, the Twin Cities Pride Magazine, and the Southeast Asian Dysorphia Project. Alongside Keen Wu, Tori has co-founded a youth-led research and art project called the Asian American Youth Storytellers. In her free time, Tori sings while biking, spoils her cat, which some of you may have seen earlier on screen, and enjoys reality television and mystery novels. So I would like to welcome Tori to share her story. And Tori, we don't see you yet, so I believe your video, there you are, and you are muted, so we need to, hey Tori, how's it going today?
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. Hi everyone, again, my name's Tori. I want to say that I am a digital illustrator and public artist, totally self-taught and full-time. I am an emerging artist and business owner. I started my career in 2017, and I also draw upon my 6+ years of community organizing and activism to create my work. I'm really excited to share with you all today what I've been noodling on, so I'll just get into it.
Great.
So I am what people call on the internet an SJW, or a social justice warrior.
I love it.
Yes, mostly what that means to me is that I'm a 2D visual artist who wants to co-create a world where we can be a little bit more human every single day. I also swear a bit in my speech that I've prepared, so just a heads up for that. My hopes for this talk is to, 1, ground us, and 2, begin illuminating options that we as craftspeople, artists, and creatives have during this unprecedented crisis. I view what I'm sharing as a part of a larger ongoing conversation, and I'm here to share snippets of it from my own perspective. So I encourage you all to take what works for you, noodle on what challenges you, and leave behind what doesn't. So how can we coordinate new ways of working on an individual level? Personally, this time has come at a cost to my own mental health. My PTSD is coming back for another rodeo, and back I go into therapy. And I imagine that everyone else's mental health isn't doing so hot either, not to mention physical, spiritual, emotional, financial health. So first and foremost, coordinating new ways of working starts with listening to yourself and taking stock of your personal situation. How is your mind, body, spirit, and heart today? Is that grief or fear that you're feeling related to anything you've experienced before, or is it imminent? Having an honest, caring, and responsible relationship with your humanity is always important, and even more so in global crisis. After you do your internal check-in and handling any imminent crises, I ask that you take care of your immune system. This includes taking your vitamin C, physical distancing, asking for support, and also calming down so that you can consider your next steps with thoughtfulness, not urgency. That means thinking about the reality of your situation and do what you can for others and our society. However, I want to take this time to urge you not to overextend yourself. We're going to need everyone 3 months from now. This crisis isn't going to go anywhere. And so it doesn't do anyone any good to burn out this early. On a business level, hang on 1 second here. Okay. So on a business level, I was so excited about my business plan going into 2020. I was going to center my business around in-person events, such as selling my work at markets and conferences, participating in like in-person exhibitions, and painting murals during the summer. I found that this was where my business made the most money and also where I had the most fun. I was actually going to try and shift away from digital illustration in order to go into kind of a more fine arts route instead of doing commission work. But 3 months into 2020 and my plan just went kaput. So now I'm shifting my business back into digital illustration because 1, I have the skills, 2, that's what the market needs, and 3, that's what working remotely dictates. I am making this switch slowly because I want to practice what I preach and be thoughtful, not urgent in what I do. And as for all of the other plans I had for myself and my business this year, I'm going to try to think about what drew me to those goals and fulfill them in remote and creative manners this year with the goals that I want to keep. Some of them I can shelve, or some of them I'm just like, okay, like this isn't even worth thinking about right now. But anyway, I just want to encourage people to think about those goals that they have and like taking the core nuggets of them and fulfilling them, because prioritizing yourself in your life and in your business is incredibly important too. The next question I want to ask and answer is, how can we coordinate new ways of working collectively? This pandemic is likely going to change our economy and our lifestyles. We can only go towards a new normal. I don't really want to get into it here, but there's a lot of bad shit happening right now, especially in the United States. And of course, we don't want bad shit to consume us. We're creatives, we're all 500 plus of us are here together, and we want to weave better worlds together. So I wanted to give some examples of artists that I admire who have responded to this crisis in a couple different ways. The first one is my peer, my friend, collaborateur, Corey Nakamura-Lin. She painted this beautiful image of Okinawan sea life. And she also, I'm gonna go into my screen share. She also, let's see, here we go. She also launched an emergency support fundraiser for a local family-owned business called Spinning Wild. Corey has had a business, or has a relationship with the business and family that has spanned for a couple years now. And Spinning Wild is a family-owned, there's like 3 generations of the family who like work and who exist like within the business, including the owner, her mother, and her child, as well as her husband. And Spinning Wild has shown up in community spaces, offering innovation, joy, and Asian flavors all through cotton candy. So Corey ran this fundraiser for Spinning Wild, using her platforms and her network to raise over $2,000 in less than a week to support Spinning Wild and the family that owns the business, to get them through the month of April while they wait on some business loans to tie them through this crisis. The next artist I want to, and this is Corey's Instagram page. Feel free to follow her, corey.lin.art. All right, next, and then this is Spinning Wild, spinningwild.com. If you're in Minnesota or in Minneapolis, they offer curbside local delivery and shipping for their awesome cotton candy. The next artist I wanted to highlight is Marina Akitaka. Marina drew and created this comic called Mutual Aid. She is a game maker, she's a comic book artist, she's an illustrator, and what she did in response to COVID-19 was create this story. It's a 12-page erotic sci-fi fantasy comic that also includes a text-only version for accessibility and pleasure. And it's a sweet story about fighting and loving creatively in the post-apocalypse. But basically what she did is she created this comic, launched it last week on Monday, March 23rd, and all the proceeds, you can see here, $5 plus, all the proceeds that come into this comic go to unrestricted donations for COVID-19 relief with a focus on her local Twin Cities community. 3 days after its release on March 26th, Mutual Aid had already raised over $400. And so I'm really inspired by this because even though I don't have a ton of financial resources right now, Marina and other artists have found ways to use their craft in order to kind of capture those resources and then redistribute it for COVID-19. So if you want to see more of Marina's work, you can go on her website. It is marinaakitaka.com, and that's her. So going out of screen share, back to my face.
Yep.
Hello again. I just want to close with this. We are in the midst of a local, national, and global we're in the midst of local, national, and global social structures, economic systems, everything faltering and potentially crumbling. However, creativity thrives in the midst of chaos. So remember to listen to that creative spirit. Draw upon the strength of your communities, your people, and your ancestors. Leave behind the toxic shit that you don't want to see in our collective futures, because we all have that, and so do our pasts and our lineages. Plant new seeds in your personal life, your business, and your communities. Document what you witness and what you do. And in a few months and years and generations, we'll be able to have a relationship to what grows next. So
that's great. Thank you, Tori. A question that I have for you is, you really work about, your work is really about collective collaboration. How are you finding that you're expanding your collaborations in a virtual realm? Have you created new ways to integrate and to collaborate with other artists?
So I don't know if it's new ways necessarily. I mean, so I'm a millennial. I have grown up on the internet. I live on the internet part-time. And I'm also a digital illustrator, so a lot of my work is remote and online. So I'm really lucky that I can just kind of draw upon what I did growing up. I think Ayume said it really well, where the internet's going back to kind of how we used to connect, which was like, weird AIM, chats where it's just like you and one person chatting or FaceTiming and just catching up and talking about, I don't know, I guess, so concretely, not yet, other than the personal conversations I've had. Moving forward, I did, Corey and I actually are starting to work on a COVID-19 emergency, like artist response project together. And she lives in Chicago, I live in Minneapolis. So actually the technology is working great for us. So feeling really
great. Wonderful. I think what was really, like besides the collaboration and working kind of in a new digital realm for you, I think one of the things that you mentioned, which seems to have really resonated with people in the chat, is this idea of being more thoughtful and proactive rather than reactionary in the way that we work right now. Yeah. It's so easy for us to read a couple articles, right? Or to see some social media posts and get kind of all spin up into this crazy place of fear, and trying to take time to take care of ourselves, and then to take time to actually make very thoughtful, strategic decisions as we move through trying to figure out how each of us as individuals are going to navigate this. So I think that was something that I wanted to share with you, as people really, in the chat, it kind of was like, go, like, go on, girl, praise it. So people were very excited about that. I think that's a nice reminder for all of us. Before I let you go, one last question is, a lot of people are trying to figure out and this could be a question that actually all of the presenters can answer a little bit later too, but how do you find your community? Especially when you're in your home and a lot of people aren't connected or ready to a community. A lot of them are asking, like, how can they find places where other people who are making masks or PPEs and get involved? How can people find other artists to actually commune with? Obviously, the reality is right now we have 515 people on this call. So there's a big community right there that we can all, start to connect with as well. But do you have some thoughts on that and how you've found your community?
Yeah. So for me, I feel really lucky to have been sowing the seeds of community for as long as I've been here in Minneapolis, which is 10 years. But if you're new to wanting to join, certain types of community, or maybe, your community has fallen by the wayside because personal life gets in the way, I think, I don't know, I guess it's going back to that question, or that idea of not doing things out of urgency. I know we want to feel connected, and that's like a human need, but I guess just listening and watching and searching, taking things in. But honestly, for me, it's just those one-on-one conversations, and from there, it's like things spark. It's the domino effect. It lights the match, and usually when you tell someone, what your feelings are and what you're desiring, what you're hoping for, just letting yourself air that out there in the public, or in public with another person, that can bring about, small changes or big changes. So
yeah, thank you. And Lauren put a really great thought in chat. If anybody would like to build your virtual community now, feel free to share your online handles, your addresses, websites, anything at all, so that we can actually all work together and connect together, which is great. And also, if anybody has any hashtags that they've been following that are really strong right now, of people who are doing really excellent things, I think that would also be really great for us to be able to connect better. So I'm seeing people putting them in there in the chat. So while you're doing that, thank you so much, Tori, for sharing kind of the ways that you've evolved and pivoted your work and created your own personal community collaborations. We really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
As we move into our last presenter, we're really thinking about ways to continue to collaborate with other artists. How do we connect with community? I think one of the lessons that I personally am seeing so much, and personally, I work from home and I don't connect to my local community very often. And now that I am stuck at home, I want to connect to them even more. What we've invited Michael Strand, and Michael Strand is the professor and founding director of the School of Design, Architecture, and Art at North Dakota State University, which is a new title for Michael. So congratulations, Michael. He is a 2014 Bush Foundation Fellow and was named 2015 Ceramic Artist of the Year by Ceramics Monthly, the largest publication of ceramic art internationally. Strand also serves on the board of trustees for the American Craft Council and was recently elected to the International Academy of Ceramics at UNESCO, United Nations affiliated organization based in Switzerland. Strand exhibits and lectures internationally with recent engagements at the Renwick Gallery of American Art and the Smithsonian at Washington, D.C., and Rion Design Museum in Sweden. I'm going to butcher this one. The Yingyi Ceramic Museum in Taipei, Taiwan. The Universidad Sandu, and my Spanish is horrendous too, Rio del Rey in Brazil, New York's College of Ceramics in Alfred, and the Estonian Academy of Art in Tallinn, Estonia. So Michael definitely gets around. And Michael, we would love for you to take a few moments to share with us how you feel it's so important for your work, because it's always engaged with community and with social impact. And we just would love to hear from you today about how you're continuing to do that.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Thank you for Springboard and the American Craft Council. And another shout out to Laura Zabel, who's celebrating her 15th year at the Springboard for the Arts.
Happy birthday!
I'm hanging out with my cup by Umi Horie, is a good friend of mine. And she's kept me company, and often does in moments where I want to be around somebody so inspiring. So thank you the previous folks who presented as well. I want to preface by everything. I'm going to talk quickly. I have 5 minutes. Preface everything by saying that I have the privilege of being privilege, as in I wake up every day and think I have the best job in the world to be working with students every day, 500 undergrads and 50 grad students. And as somebody who was a first generation college student, I never failed to see the wonderment of that every day. And I see it as a significant opportunity, but also requirement of my position to actually do everything that I do in my research is for the benefit of the field. And I can, because I'm paid in my job, everything I do is experimental, trying to find new ways for artists to connect to the world. And I want to share one of those with you today. And then I have some ideas around customization. I'm working on a website, I'm working on a plan, and all of this connects. Now I'm going to share my screen first of all. Let me pull this up. I'm going to take you through, I've been working on projects around emergency management, which is a term we're all learning about now, for quite a long time. This is actually a self-portrait. I'll go to the next image. I'm a ceramic artist, but I never really think of that as my boundary. It's a material I use and appropriate for a lot of things I do. But I really think about the world as a system, and it's becoming, as you know, more and more apparent every day as we're dealing with this pandemic, that the world is connected and systematized. And so I live in a community in Fargo, North Dakota, where we have an annual flood. This is something that happens. In fact, we're at a critical flood stage right now at over 30 feet. Every year we're faced with the concept that we might have to in some way sandbag and save the city. This graphic is actually what is a flood forecasting map, which obviously they need some UX, UI work or some design work on this image. But essentially it comes out in January. And at this time, and this is from 2011, there was about a 30% chance that the entire city would be completely gone. And that's 250,000 people. And that's almost every year. Last few years, it hasn't been that critical. And maybe with our diversion, we won't be as critical. But what this has meant that this is what our city looks like, and what it looked like for a number of years. Essentially, the entire community has to get together. This is from 2009. It's funny, isn't it funny when we see images like this now? I'm like, oh, wow, that doesn't look safe.
No, it doesn't. We can't do that right now.
But this is what happens when a community gets together, and this is 2009, and 3 million sandbags were made to essentially save the city. The federal government said you need to leave the city now. Fargo is going to be gone. And the city rallied and filled sandbags, and they had to do it year after year. And I grew up in this community and then moved back for this position I'm in. And so I was part of this when I was younger, or at least part of the thread of this. And what happens is over time, this gets to be old. So a community that has to save itself every year. And as an artist and as a designer, I think about how what we do and where it exists in culture is probably being the most important place for innovation today. And this is an example of that. Now, this is not a market-driven innovation, but it's just thinking about this as a system. So what you have is a whole bunch of people who are working hard to save a city. Morale becomes an issue if you do it every year. How do you keep asking a city to come back? And it's very sort of very efficient. Actually, on a local level, we are pretty damn efficient when it comes to emergency management because we're much more organized on some level locally. But getting together in these, and I just thought these white sandbags that go through, and I just imagined what would happen if a pink robot came through the sandbag line that was made by a third grader, or a message of encouragement would come through. And this is what a sandbag line looks like when you're saving your city. So all of that is just these white sandbags. And I just see this as an opportunity. I see this as a place where ideas and art, and I actually see this as a textile project because these are really in some ways a textile object, these bags. How can I interrupt that flow and move ideas and encouragement from folks who can't help with the flood fight to send messages of encouragement to those that do? And so I went to the city and asked for 1,000 sandbags, and they thought I was a little crazy. And I think they thought I wanted to have an exhibition. And I said, no, I want to move these bags through the system. Would you help me? And it took a couple meetings. This is similar to a pandemic. We had about a month to prepare for an inevitable catastrophe. And so I didn't have much time. I only had about a week or two to get this together. So I worked with all the local high schools and nursing homes, and the budget was like $500, and I didn't even use it. I didn't need to write a grant for this. It was just the idea of communication and getting all these things connected. So if you imagine, sandbags go from a stack of empty bags into a filling station, into a pile on a pallet, and then into the sandbag line. So it goes through all of those hands to actually move into space. So what I did is I went to the grade schools, went to their curriculum meetings. They immediately put it into their system in grade schools. And of course, kids are the absolute best at this. I imagined robots coming through, and I got this awesome, like many of these, but I love this rainbow robot. And all these messages of encouragement, and worked with nursing homes and assisted living homes, and they sent messages of encouragement. And kids are just amazing, and so they did. And so it really worked, and it was something that, what it did, because I always like to know what is the impact of anything, is that it changed the nature on some level of what it means to be part of that system. When you are just working away and this message comes through, what does that do to lift the spirits of people doing the hard work of saving the city? And so this little interjection, this little moment of shifting a system through ideas, and you can think about this with whatever discipline you're in. How does what you make, how is it valued in culture beyond the thing that's just a commodity? Like this cup by Ayumi is far more than a thing I purchased. It's far more than a collected object. This cup by Ayumi is absolutely a connection to the maker, and that's incredibly valuable to me. Well, how do we understand that, and how do we move that? Anyways, back to this project. There was all kinds of messages. Some of them were kind of snarky, like, don't forget your boots. Is the water rising yet? And this is a very, very, it's not in the same way life or death urgent, but it's life or death of a city, literally. Like whether or not all of these homes are going to be wiped out, including mine, by the way. So what I love is this image here. This is one of the city administrators who very much was about efficiency, and I love that. It's very North Dakota. And this came through, and there was an image of William Shatner with a ray gun, and it said, like, Shatner will save you, or Captain will save you. And this administrator like laughed and said, I get this is fun. And it was. And what happened is it shifted the tenor of this whole process from being simply about saving to also celebrating what it means to communicate with one another. So a very simple project. I did do 63 sandbags in honor of my mother, who passed away from cancer the year previous. And so I disseminated 63 pink sandbags throughout the city to honor her as an amazing community leader. In the end, I love, look at this sandbag here. Some of these I just wish I still had, but that wasn't the point. The point that they had their life. In the end, it moved through this, all these moved through the sandbag line onto the pallets, into the hands of people filling sandbags and protecting the city. And it became, in about 2 weeks, 6,000 people from 13 states contributed to this project, and 9,000 bags were put into the system. So if you want to think of it as an exhibition, I guess you can, and that is that there's miles and miles of wall made up of sandbags with intermittent messages and images. So something like that, and I'll quit sharing my screen now. There's lots of different things I could share, and I thought, well, that was a pretty timely thing to share given the conditions that we're in right now. But what I think it exercises is, I'm a very functionally oriented person. So what I want to do with it comes from being a functional potter. How do I extend function into areas far beyond what it means to drink something, or as a commodified object that you buy and collect? How is the function of what we do impact culture? And I have a lot of thoughts around that, around customization and around some other projects I do. But I'll leave it at that as a preface. I didn't show you anything to ceramics, and that's okay, except for Ayumi's cup, which
yeah. But
my coffee's going.
Michael, that question that you just asked, you know, all of the work you do is really about connecting and building community. And I know, because I'm familiar with a lot of your projects, if you would just share a tiny bit, even though we're going over a little bit, I think people are very inspired, and I'm okay staying on a little longer. Can you talk a little bit about the cup exchange you do with people in recovery? Because again, this is such a wonderful one-on-one connection. And you've always, for me, as long as I've known you and your work, it's always been about connecting with the individual and inspiring a community. And I just think that that story would also be really inspiring for our attendees to hear.
Yeah, well, so the other thing, okay, so we talk about all these, oh, what we've done, all the, here's my most, I just have to say, here's what should be on my resume. I just celebrated about 6,000 days of sobriety.
Congratulations.
Which I don't know, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, although at times during this time, I think, wow, it'd be nice to have a beer. So 16 years of sobriety is an incredible amount of information I've gathered and learned. So I do a lot of cup exchanges, thinking of the object as a way of memory. And one thing really quickly is what I do is that, and I'm scaling this in different ways and trying it out in different ways, and even working on a clinical thing with it. But so to an alcoholic, the cup, or to somebody who has like me, I had cups that actually, that object was actually killing me. Mm-hmm. The cup was a gin and tonic cup or a rum, and I had a really tall blue rum.
I was going to say, did you use a regular cup?
My dad I had a rum and Coke cup.
And he had the exact same cup every day that he drank.
It was like
from.
this big.
Yep. Yep.
And so these objects are symbolic of the choice to drink. Well, what I've been doing is replacing those objects one at a time, and you sponsor people, and what I'm doing is, instead of meeting at a coffee shop, I just make a cup for them while we talk. And it's not about me or the making, it's about the conversation we have being embedded in the moment, and then that moment and that cup being something that, when it's in their cabinet, it replaces this thing that literally was like a weapon, with something that's about their own resolve to make the right decision. It does work. The object assists in that. It's not that I think ceramic potters are, again, I keep coming back to this. It's not that I think ceramic objects are what can solve this, but I want to look at how design and objectness can be part of how we solve something significant like addiction. So I'm thinking about how we, as makers, extend way beyond the concept, and I mean this from a market standpoint, of what we make being something that somebody collects, but what is the inherent value of our philosophy and what we make in many different, if I can find emergency management connections and alcoholism connections with objects, there's unlimited amount of like opportunity to think of innovation. So that's those two things lead me at some point. I want to talk about customization, because I think that's the future. We got to stop using the word commission.
Use customization. Go for it.
We are micro manufacturers at the highest level. I can make something in 1 week and get it back to you way faster than any 3D printer, and it's based upon relationship. I can make something for, in fact, I need to make Ayumi a cup with her in mind and exactly what she wants in mind. And I can make that, and there's such a need for, and there's actually been this market around customization. I think we need to look at customization as one of the things that we excel at. So when we see other markets disappear, think about how not how the internet recreates a gallery, how does the connectivity of what we're doing today allow me to create something for you? And I think if we get into that space, we might open up completely new ways of thinking about making.
Yeah, and Ayumi says that her cup needs to be extra big, please. That was her comment. So she wants
What's
an extra
that?
Ayumi says she wants an extra big cup.
I'll make it this big, Ayumi.
Yeah. But, you know, I think it's very true, especially with objects that we interact with, right? Because I have very small hands, and so I often really pick my ceramic mugs. We only drink from either handmade glass tumblers or ceramic mugs that are handmade in my house, and the handle means so much to the way it fits to my hand. where my husband's okay with just 2 fingers around the handle, my whole hand has to fit in the handle. And so that idea of customization, the idea of creating opportunity for people to have something special that fits them only, right? And I come from the world of jewelry, and so thinking about like this adornment on the body and the opportunities for customization through that is really fascinating.
Well, I'm working on a website to kind of start working on this. So I will,
great.
if you have ACC would be a good way to connect about this, because I'm going to work with
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's okay, I'd like to ask all the presenters to go ahead and turn their video and microphones back on, because I have a few questions I just would like to ask the group. And like I said, we are running over a tiny bit, but I don't think people seem to mind. So I'd be happy to ask some of these questions. So kind of on a side note, and this just might be a generic question that I'm going to ask instead of the specific question that was asked. But, you know, a lot of educators are on here today, and a lot of you are educators, and the idea of teaching process-based education on virtually, a lot of people seem to be struggling with that. So I didn't know if any of you have come up with some very quick resources or communities that you've created, because again, the theme here has been about community. And so, you know, I just, somebody was looking for some support around that. They specifically asked about ceramics, but I think, you know, there's a lot of communities of educators that are banding together. So I just wanted to see if anybody had some answers on what they've learned over the last couple of weeks about teaching virtually. Anyone? Michael?
I will.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
but like, I don't get to talk much because I'm doing this administration. Like, yeah. You know what? We're all in the same class together right now. Nearly all of humanity is enrolled in the same class. And what I've shared with 500 students is that reality, that we're all in a class right now. And I hope the outcome of that class is a collective sense of grace, right? So first of all, those students, they're in the same class we're in. And so as we try to build out our architecture, boy, we can make architecture happen online. It's actually not too tough. But the biggest thing is that we need to recognize what we're learning collectively and make that part of how we embed that with what we're learning. If you don't, it's like, how do you not acknowledge this beyond just trying to make this an emergency teaching situation? Like, we gotta, like, this has got to be a heart and mind time. And I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else have some thoughts or want to share?
I think that's an amazing opportunity to explore other materials and processes. I mean, maybe you'll go back to the medium that is your main medium, or maybe you won't. But, you know, I mean, like for a ceramic artist, like you could use pie crust, you could use paper, you could use whatever. There's so many different things that could get translated back in. And so I feel like, you know, creativity happens on so many different levels and so many opportunities that inevitably, I think we are all going to be, this is a defining moment for the world. And so I think, like, staying open to creative possibilities.
Yeah, I think it's a defining moment for the craft community too, and the way of learning. You know, when we talk about using other materials, what is it going to look like on the other side? And like some of them people, like glass is my material. It will always be my material, but I am certainly playing with other things. I've never played with blown sugar before, and that's something that I've been thinking about doing, right? Kind of a similar thing, but different. And I think that a lot of people are talking about how will craft kind of come out on the other side? Will we be material focused mostly, or will it be mixed materials, and we all will be more open to trying and working with other materials? So I think that's a really interesting point, that people are kind of pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone. And, you know, I think we talked a lot about community, and I think we've built a really great community here. In the chat, people have shared so many wonderful points, stories of their own of what they are doing. We have now a great set of new Instagram handles to go follow, which I'm very excited about. But, you know, Michael talked about this, and actually each of you talked about this a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about how you value what you do beyond the object that you make? Does that make sense? Like Michael, you talked a lot about that because, you know, it's not just about the object for you, but it's taking that object and getting other people to value it as more than just a ceramic mug, right? And I think with your cup exchange program with people in recovery, that's a great example. But how are there some other ways or other ideas that you all have on how to really kind of create more value for craft beyond just the object itself? I know, tough question. Yeah, Tori.
Oh, I'll jump in. So something I learned, there's this word called objectification, and obviously we think about, you know, objectification of women, whatever, but in the context that I'm thinking of, objectification means the process of putting your humanity into something outside of you. And I think when we think about creativity and art, and like even like cooking or conversations or relationships, anything that's outside of yourself, if you think about the process of objectification rather than the outcome, one thing that's been really healing for me is staying away from trying to profit off of this time or feeling like I have to, or like to save myself or whatever. You know, I've got a couple months savings. I can kind of take a, and I don't have kids, you know, I'm single. I can kind of take a step back and really just process my emotions during this time, because anything we create now is going to just be like what you said, Gwen, like it's going to be, you know, it's going to be fodder for the future, and this is a defining moment. So the more we document and process and create right now, the more clear we'll be in who we're going to be as artists and craftspeople in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else want to contribute to that question?
Yeah, I can chime in.
Yeah.
I think, you know, providing value beyond sort of the commodified object is the making itself is very visceral. And making is, you know, it helps craft identity for community. Mm-hmm. So like our studio is downtown Minneapolis. And think about, you know, in downtowns, which are really the power centers of all major metropolises in the United States, how many things actually get made? I mean, it's very, very little, right?
Yeah. So
when we give tours or have, you know, people from the downtown community come through and and I'm like, yeah, behind this wall, we're blowing glass, we're making stuff right here. So we bring them into the studio, and, you know, that's such a visceral experience for them to connect to place. So I think, you know, that object is sort of a, you know, memento of that experience, you know, more than, you know, just a commodified thing. It's like, you know, it actually attaches them to that place and the experience they had. So I think, you know, the making can really build place and can be a placemaking tool as well. You know, with Michael's project, I mean, that to me just is like perfect placemaking, right? It's like, you know, looking at the environment and the set of conditions, and then saying, how do we connect people with, you know, the situation that we have to make them feel like, you know, they're better participants.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, and the term that's about creative placemaking, some of you may have heard that. That's a big term that's been used in the economic development and kind of the community development world about using, creating a sense of place through art, through craft, and how do you kind of also build economy for people around that, which I think you each are participating in, whether consciously or not, which I think is wonderful. So we are kind of coming to the end of, we are a little over, like I said, about 15 minutes over. But I think, you know, some of the things that I've heard here, which are so powerful for us, is that, you know, this is a great time of innovation. This is a great time to turn inward and spend time with yourself. Self-care, of course, is very important. And I think that that's something for everybody to think about. It's an opportunity to build new people in our community. I think sometimes we get very myopic in who we interact with. And now that we have, you know, now everybody, including baby boomers, are going to be really good at Zoom, right? So the reality is now technology cannot be much of a hurdle for people anymore. Thinking about how craft can really build community. And the real kind of theme that I keep hearing through this is how powerful craft is and how it can actually institute great change. So I want to thank all of our speakers, and I would like to actually bring onto camera and the audio, the Senior Director of Programs and Public Engagement for the American Craft Council, Scott Pollock, who pretty much was my cohort in these forums and the impetus for us getting this together. And I wanted to see, Scott, if you had any last thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience before we ended today's conversation.
Other than just, I wish we could have that rousing applause from the audience and everything. I'm seeing the comments in the chat room. Thanks everybody for your time. I don't know how you do that on chat.
Thank you.
It is truly a virtual happy hour moment. I want to thank everybody again. We are going to be meeting next Friday to get more into specifics around how artists are pursuing relief and understanding this impact. And then we'll follow up the following Friday to look at what's happening in the education sector. Love the comments. Promise we'll follow up. Gwen, you are amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, this is just such a wonderful opportunity to really connect with people, not just within jewelry and metals, which is my focus right now, but through the whole craft community, which is really where I come from. And I want to thank the presenters for, you know, being here today, sharing your stories, being open and real, right? I think this is a time of vulnerability for all of us, and we just have to be real about it. The other day, I broke down and started crying hysterically in the middle of a Zoom conversation. And, you know, that's just what it is, right? We have to allow ourselves to feel. I think, Tori, you really said that. We have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We have to allow ourselves to give ourselves a break. We don't have to be perfect right now. We don't have to be super productive right now if you're in a position of luxury to spend time with who you are, that your loved ones in your home. Hopefully you love them and like them the more you spend time with them. But it's just been wonderful to create this community, this conversation. I think our goal is really to just create some inspiring ways for people to push themselves out of their comfort zone, to think differently. We know you all are having amazing challenges right now, from, you know, food insecurity all the way to, you know, wanting to make with not being able to go to your studios, not being able to have, you know, steady income. I know so many artists have lost their ability to sell their wares. And I'm just really excited if we all come together as a community. Artists are creative and innovative solution, you know, problem solvers, and we can do this. We can figure out what this is going to look like on the other side. And so I'm just very, very excited about the conversations we're about to had and continue to have. So, you know, thank you very much. A couple little technical or logistical things. There's a lot of questions. We will be saving the chat, and then Lauren will be kind of combining that chat. Zoom saves a chat in like a TXT document. It's super awkward to read. It's really hard. So Lauren is going to be our wonderful person to congregate and bring everything together. Everybody will get, this will be shared. ACC will talk about how they can share it so people can access it. So, you know, it will be accessible for everybody to re-listen to re-look at the chats, to find everybody's Instagram handles. We know we didn't get to everybody's questions. I know that that's kind of a real big thing, and we're really sorry about that. We'll have to, Scott, you and I, we might have to put our heads together and figure out ways to deal. Some of these questions are really good. A lot of these questions, if you're not planning already to tune into next week, a lot of these questions will be answered on next week's presenters that really are getting into talking about the CARES Act and, you know, safety and different ways to kind of deal with that. How do you apply for unemployment? How do you apply for an SBA loan? All of those kind of things. So please also note that. And again, it's just been such an inspiration to be able to join with so many people all over the United States and probably across the world. I guarantee there's probably some people from other countries here too. It's just such a wonderful opportunity. So ACC, SURF, and Springboard, thank you for including Snag and me. It's just been wonderful. I get to go off into my weekend inspired. And Sarah, do you have some last thoughts that you'd like to share as well?
No, I just want to thank everybody. Amazing, amazing conversation. And really thank you to all the co-hosts of this. Thanks to SURF and Springboard, ACC. Again, everyone, this is what collaboration gets you. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, attendees. We look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing you next Friday. Everybody stay safe and healthy and take care of yourself, please. Bye.
Done.